All right. So why don't we get started? Anyone that wants to join
Okay.
can join, but we're also going live in the Facebook group as well as the Zoom feature.
Okay.
As we go along, for anyone listening, if you guys have questions about anything that we're either talking about, or if you already have questions that you came in with, feel free to type it in the Q&A feature or the chat, whichever one you want. Q&A, I think, only goes to us. If you do it to the chat, you can choose to either have everyone see it or just us, the panelists. Okay. So we have Carol Schaefer here, who is a psychologist. She's also a steadfast member of, what do you usually come to, the 8:30 class? One of the morning classes,
have my
right?
cat here too.
Perfect. I love it. One of Carol's recommendations will be to get a cat,
Right.
to deal with the stress.
Only one.
Right.
Not five. I had 5 till my daughter took one. So now I have 4.
Yes. Wow. Oh my gosh. That is,
yes. And
that's
2
a lot.
dogs.
So maybe that's a trick, to just have a lot of other things to take care of, just to keep your mind off things.
That's it, right?
So Carol, why don't you give a little bit of background about how you got into this field, your history. I think we share an alma mater in Villanova.
Yes.
So yeah, give a little bit of background.
I was one of these people who I consider to be very blessed that from the time I was probably about 3, I've known what I wanted to do. I've worked, when I was a little girl, one of the stories I heard as I grew up was that I was in a little ice skating group, and the teacher said to my mom, "Oh, she's so helpful. If one of the other little kids falls down, she's the first one there to help them up." So it's been just sort of what I've always done. And my friends, as I was like, teenage years, and they'd always say, "Oh, I feel so much better when I talk to you." And so I just knew. And it's funny because when I was probably about 15, we drove by Villanova University, and I said to my mom, "Oh, what's that?" I was probably younger than 15. She said, "Oh, that's Villanova University." I said, "Well, that's where I want to go to school." And I never applied anywhere else. I just went there and I did my master's, my undergraduate. So anyway, I've always known that this is what I wanted to do. I love what I do. I've always loved it. We've been now in business for about 36 years. My business partner and I, we followed none of the proper rules for partnership. It was just, it should have been a disaster, but it's been such an amazing relationship that she and I have had. And we have another woman that's been with us for about 25 of those 36 years. So we have a nice little group. And yeah, so I do mostly individual work. The one other woman that works with us likes to work with teenagers and kids and families, so she does a lot of that. My business partner loves marital work, so she does a lot of that. I really like to work with stress and anxiety and depression and self-esteem and all those kind of neurotic that we all struggle with.
Yeah, well, God bless you, because you enjoy working with that, and I don't think many other people would enjoy it.
A lot of people will say that. How can you do it? And I'm like, I feel so energized. And part of it is because I'm always focused on where you want to go. And you must do that too with the gym. I mean, I know when I first started there, I could barely bend over. and really, and you must really keep a vision for yourself of where you want the person would want to be and how they in their own body. And that's kind of what I do too, is, I get a feel for where people want to be and help them to go in that direction. So that's the
focus. I think there is a lot of similarity. I find it super beneficial to have a counseling background, because I went to Villanova first for engineering, and I switched in the middle of my junior year to human services, but stayed like you to get my master's in counseling. And I just, I see fitness, or, our physical, our space now, not so much physical, but online, as a way for people to relieve stress. And there's a lot of the same, honestly, strategies where one size does not fit all. You gotta have to see what the for you, client, for me, member or client, right, what their
Right.
goals are, and
Right.
then take it step by step, which, for us is why I like the level method, so that you can see the micro steps to take.
Right.
I imagine for you in your practice, it's more about taking those micro steps, either, emotionally or mentally.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so that's why I wanted to have you on for this webinar, because we're in unprecedented times.
We really are.
Um,
Yes.
People are, now we're what, maybe going on to our 5th week already of this. I mean, March 13th is when we shut down.
Yes.
So, people have
Right.
had a little bit time to process this. So it would have been a different
Mhm.
conversation maybe if we had this then versus now.
Right.
But still, I feel like people are stressed for various reasons, right?
Right.
They own a business like ourselves, and
Right.
are trying to figure out that. They have kids at home.
Right.
Their work is disrupted regardless, right?
Right.
Whether kids or no kids. People who always are on the road traveling aren't doing that anymore.
Right.
So I thought we could just get your take, since not only is stress a specialty of yours, but also you have this crossover of being a member here with us, but also doing this for your profession. So let's say, someone came and talked with you and was just like, look, I'm really stressed out. I don't know what's going on. What are some things that you would at least start with them talking about?
Well, usually I would have them talk about what it is that's going on for them that is causing them to feel stressed. And what I find with anxiety and stress, and often they're connected with one another, is that people get out ahead of themselves. So when the heart of anxiety is, oh my God, what if? It's this projection of, what if this goes on for 6 months? What if I lose my business? What if, what if this, what if that? And it's always the catastrophe. It's always the worst. So that that seems to be the heart of anxiety. And I think, like I said, I see anxiety and stress as uh, so one of the things that I work with people on doing is not getting so far ahead of themselves, and coming
Mm,
back to first the breath. The breath is so important because it helps to physically calm your body, and then to focus on right now. And how am I right now? Is everything okay right now in this moment? Am I good? Are the kids fed? Is the electric paid? And just kind of really grounding in the present.
mhm, mhm,
And that's a skill that, just like a muscle that we would want to develop, you want to develop your bicep. You don't go to the gym once and go lifting 25 pounds and go, oh, now I should have it, right? It's the best way is a little bit over time, and you build and you build and you build. And this is very similar when a lot of people don't understand that. They think that they should be able to just tell themselves, well, everything's fine, and then everything should be fine. And it's not. It's a muscle. The mind is a muscle that we need to work and create good habits with.
got it.
And most of our minds are like undisciplined children, like an undisciplined 3-year-old that's running around, tearing the house apart, coloring on the walls. And what would you do with that kid? I mean, you would confronted with a kid like that you had to train. You would keep bringing them back to what it is you want them to do, and you wouldn't get
Mm,
mad at them. You would try not to get mad at them, and that's part of this. Really trying not to treat yourself badly, to be
mm,
kind to yourself, to be gentle with yourself. And I have a little, before we end, I'll give you a little, be really, really helpful for that kind of thing. So the main thing would be breathing. I think that's, and we sort of, I think breathing is very underrated. And yet when you think about what is the single most important thing in terms of keeping us alive, we can go a certain amount of days without food. There are people, apparently, I haven't met any personally, but I hear there are breatharians who just live on air. But you can only go so long without water, but you take that breath away. And most people think, well, I am breathing, because they're breathing, but they're breathing a thimbleful. They're breathing into this part of the chest, and it doesn't ever move the diaphragm down. So you're not really relaxing the body. I remember I did Taekwondo years ago, and my grandmaster said to me, "You breathe." And I said, "What are you talking about? I breathe." And I dismissed him. And it was 20 years later, when I was using an inhaler for asthma almost every day because I couldn't breathe, that I started doing breath work. And I haven't used an inhaler in probably about 2 years, a good year and a half, but probably close to 2 at this point, just because I've been doing diaphragmatic breathing. And it didn't happen overnight, but it happened as I worked more and more on the breath and being conscious of that. There's a little app you can get, it's Insight Timer. And it allows you to have a little, you can have a little reminder that goes off. However, you can set it for however often you want to set it. And you can remind yourself, because we don't remember to breathe. I really worked at this. I really practiced it, and it really made a difference in my life.
So if someone is just hearing about
really
diaphragmatic breathing, and this is we talk about, and we talk about this when we even lift, and it happens. It needs to happen so much in lifting and moving your body. As a birth coach, we talk about this a lot with our prenatal and postpartum ladies. So, but if someone hasn't heard of it, do you want to give like a quick explanation as to what that means, or what an exercise would look like to work on diaphragmatic breathing, like what that actually entails?
It's very, very simple, and the easiest way to see if you are is to lie flat down on your back, put your hands on your belly, take a deep breath, and see if your hands move. And for most people, if they were to just lay down and breathe normally, nothing would move. And if they take a deep breath, maybe it moves a little bit. But as you practice, expand, when you push the diaphragm down, it expands everything out. So, and it gives a good massage to all the internal organs. So I myself like breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth, and just doing it as smoothly. And I don't, you can count if you want. You can, some people like to count in 6 and exhale 10 or what, it's completely up to you. But I find just focusing on breathing in and then breathing out, that's really all you need to do. You don't have to make it complicated.
Right.
A lot of people try to make it too complicated.
Yep. Yeah, I like the belly. I like the hand on the belly. And then you could also, I find what works is if you put your thumbs on the back of your hips or your waist, that way you can feel that you're breathing into the floor if you're laying down as well. I find sometimes people focus too much on breathing like up or only out of their belly.
True.
And really they should be thinking about breathing like 360,
right.
Which, applies a little bit more to lifting, but okay. So just breathing. And then I also heard not being so hard on yourself. I think that happens a lot.
So important.
So can you talk about that? And because I'm sure you see it a lot with people just beating themselves up over not being like the perfect parent or the perfect employee or.
Right. Well, and what happens is if somebody feels bad about something, we're taught in our culture, feelings are bad. We're not supposed to be too angry. We're not supposed to be too sad, because that's being too sensitive. And we darn sure aren't should settle down, right? That's a lot of people are taught that. So we try to dummy down our feelings, and then when we feel sad or we feel angry, we, instead of just letting it be, what what we tend to do is we then start judging ourselves. What's wrong with me? I'm too sensitive. What's wrong with me? I shouldn't be so angry. I'm a horrible person. Or, we start saying these awful things to ourselves. And I've worked a lot with people with grief, and that is probably the number one reason that people don't process grief, because they grieve and then they start judging themselves for grieving, and then that turns into depression. Because the heart of depression is, I'm no good. I'm not good enough. I'm worthless. I mean, depending on how deep the depression is, it can be, I don't deserve to live. I mean, that if it's really bad depression.
Right.
So those are all thoughts that we are telling ourselves. Those aren't feelings. Those are thoughts, and we can take control of our thoughts. But again, it's like a muscle. You're not going to wake up and go, okay, I'm going to watch what I think today. First of all, if you do that, 5 minutes from now, you will have completely forgotten. Right. Just like breathing. That's why I have the reminder on my phone, because we tend to get caught up in our day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Totally.
it's something that we really need to practice. And I find if you're not aware of your thoughts, what will happen is you'll become aware when you start to feel. So if you're feeling depressed or you're feeling anxious, if you catch it then and you say to yourself, okay, what's going on that I'm feeling that way? And you start to look back at the thoughts. You'll be able to, if you practice it, you'll be able to trace the thoughts back and see that you were telling yourself something like, what's wrong with me? I'm too sensitive. Nobody likes me, whatever. Or if it's an anxious thing, you're thinking things like, oh my God, what's going to happen if this happens? Or, so if you can trace back the thoughts, then you can challenge them and you can say, well, is that true? Is it true that I'm too sensitive? Maybe I'm just me.
So there's a couple things that I want to unpack there. Number one is this idea of grief. So, obviously there's been, unfortunately fatalities as relates to this whole situation. But I also feel like, people can be grieving in ways because there's a loss, maybe not a physical loss, right? But a loss of routine,
any loss.
A loss of control, right? Or the illusion of control, the loss of their normal schedule, right? So can you give an overview of like the stages of grief and the fact that there are stages? And I'm sure people have heard of at least the fact that there are stages, but maybe go over some of those ideas, and like also the fact that people can be at different points of grief in this whole process.
Well, there are stages of grief, and I'm not sure I am going to be able to run through all of them.
Sure. Yeah.
But I know, the last one is acceptance. But it starts off usually with, we try to deny that this is going on, and we try to deny the feelings. And then there comes usually anger and bargaining. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not up on all of them, but I think there's 5 stages of grief. And there's actually someone who just wrote a book about the 6th stage, and he was a guy who lost a child. And he said the 6th stage is really something along the lines of navigating the new world, because it's never going to be what it was. Not that it ever is, but it changes so dramatically when you have a big loss like that, that it's how do you incorporate that loss into your life and have meaning and purpose. So that's beyond the acceptance.
Got it.
Yeah.
So one is acknowledging just that there's a loss of some sort, right? But then I liked how you said that when you feel something, go back to the thought, because usually it's the thought that you can kind of trace things back to, right? where would that come from? You know, is it a physical trigger? Is it an environment thing?
When you say where would that come from, you mean the thought? Where does the thought come from?
Yeah, where do you find people are kind of perseverating or, you know, kind of fixated on the negative emotions and negative thoughts from
Well, I think a lot
stress
of
and
it has to
anxiety?
do with how we're brought up. You know, I think if you grow up with a parent that's anxious or family members that are anxious, you sort of learn by observation. I mean,
Hmm.
I remember one of my aunts saying to me, I was a little bit late for a party. She's she said, "Oh, I'm just so glad you got here. I was so worried. I thought you had an accident." And she had this vivid, I won't go into it, but she had this vivid image of me in this accident. And I said to her, "But Aunt Carmela, what if I had won the lottery and I just went to pick up my money?" You know what I mean? Like, why did you go to that? But that was, she was a big worrier. And I am convinced that she was convinced that the reason I showed up was because she worried. So
Mm.
there's this undercurrent of belief, I think, in anxiety, that there's this belief that if I worry enough, I can keep this
Hmm.
bad thing from happening. It's what you were saying before about the illusion of control. It's an attempt to control that which is uncontrollable. And one of the things for people that I work with anxiety, two things. One is to ask yourself, what's the worst that can happen? And then figure that out. And then the second thing is to ask yourself, and could I deal with that? I'm not saying, would you be happy dealing with it?
Hmm.
You know, I've often said,
Right.
if something happened to one of my kids, I may deal with it by being in a rubber room. I don't know. I may deal with
Hmm.
it by needing medication. I don't know, but I know I'll deal with it. And so knowing that, I'll figure it out one way or the other. I'll figure it out. I don't anticipate that any of those things, like those would be the worst case scenarios. I don't
Yeah.
expect that that would happen, but it's that piece of knowing that I'll figure it out. And that's some of what I think can help people going through these times, which are, everybody's talking about, they're unprecedented. We've never been through anything like this. Human has, we haven't. There's been lots of plagues before. Not that this is a plague, but they're treating it like it's a plague. You know, and humanity has figured it out. So
Hmm.
we will figure this out, and we will get onto the other side of this. And there might be some casualties, as there are in, as there just is in life, right? I mean, that's part of life. And if you can figure out how to roll with those things.
When you're doing that exercise of what's the worst that can happen and can I handle this,
Mhm.
what's the goal with that? Is the goal to put into perspective what your thoughts are now so that you go so far beyond that to worst
Well,
case scenarios?
like
Or
I
is it,
said, with anxiety, the big thing is, oh my God, what if? And the oh my God, what if is a black hole. When you ask people, oh my, well, what are you really afraid is going to happen? Most people aren't able to articulate it. So when you say to them, well,
mm,
okay, well, talk to me about what's the worst thing that could happen, and they begin to articulate it, first of all, it helps them to be conscious of what it is they're really afraid of. And then once they look at that, then they can realize that, you know, no, it wouldn't be my preference. I had a woman say to me one day, well, I couldn't stand it if something happened to one of my parents. Okay, well, let's work on that, because something's going to happen to one of your parents unless you die before them. So
mm,
let's work on that. Let's figure out how you, right now you're telling yourself you couldn't stand it. So you're, of course you've got anxiety. If you think you can't stand something and you wouldn't be able to handle something, that's cause. So
got it.
let's, you know, so we would delve into that and really try to come up with some ideas of how would you handle that? Because
Yeah.
you would.
So it's being prepared, even from like a mental standpoint of preparing yourself to at least acknowledge and handle whatever situation you might be thinking about.
Whatever gets thrown at us, or whatever, it's like that whole expression, roll with the punches. It's whatever life throws at you. If you can figure out how to roll with that, you're going to have a much better experience than if you try to block it.
Yeah.
So
I want to talk about things like social media, TV, the news, all of this input, and this idea of, whether that's a good thing, a bad thing, is it neutral? Should people limit their inputs because, watching the news is too sensationalized, and seeing, people do, 20 different projects with their kids while you're just trying to, keep them water and fed and not lost, right, is another.
Right.
What's your take on that,
So,
on news, social media, all that stuff?
Okay, so let's talk about them separately. So news,
Okay.
I personally try to avoid it at all costs. I try to be somewhat informed about what's going on in my world, but I really try not to get caught up in it, because I do think that it depends on what news you're tuning into, what information you get, and how do we know we really don't know what's real. We really don't know all we know is what they're presenting to us. And if you turn this station on, you're getting one thing. If you turn that station on, you're getting something else. So I tend to steer away from the news. As far as social media, I think if you're a person who's going to look for someone that you can compare yourself against, that you can feel like you're not good enough, social media is a death trap. Now you can certainly find those people not on social media. You can go out in your neighborhood and you can look at the neighbor and say, oh, well, she's doing everything so much better than I am. She's probably sailing through this. And so if that, to me, would be the real heart of it, more than whether you do tune into social media or not. All the time, I would work on that. And I would definitely stay away from social media, because it's just a breeding ground for that kind of thing. But if you work on that, not comparing yourself to anybody else, because we are all so unique and we all have our own gifts, and we're all going to handle things in different ways, and it's all okay.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like the type of person, or if you're the type that may compare yourself to others easily, it could be in the real world, like across the street, or it could be on social media. It's kind of the same thing. Yeah.
Well, it's sort of like alcohol. I mean, you could run into alcohol in a restaurant, but you're going to find more of it in a bar. So if you're trying to stay away from alcohol, stay out of the bar. Doesn't mean when you go over to your friend's house, you might not see beer in the fridge, but thing where you can't stay out of your neighborhood because that's where you live. But if that's a tendency for you, I would really work on that, and then I would really steer away from, because social media no one presents themselves on social media the way they really are. Or let me rephrase that. That's not true. Very few people are really raw and honest about who they are on social media.
Right.
So I will tell you that the last 6 weeks I have been without my horse because our barn closed down, and I have been a wreck, truly. It's been very, very difficult, because he's part of how I cope with my anxiety. He's very grounding. We have such a connection. So we moved my girlfriend and I, we moved our horses today. So I'm having a very up day today. Had you done this with me yesterday, my eyes would have been all bloodshot, and that's okay. I'm okay with that.
Right.
So
how we've been talking a lot about stress and anxiety. How would you say that they're similar and different?
Well, like I said, I think the heart of anxiety is the oh my God, what ifs,
Hmm.
and it's projecting externally, or projecting into the future usually.
Got it.
Stress can be very immediate. Stress can be very much in the present moment. I mean, if you know, say your little kids come running in and you're in the middle of doing something like this, then that would bother you. It might not bother a lot of people, but some people might get bothered by that. And so,
Right.
you know, the matter is though, it always does come down to two things: our perception and what we tell ourselves about what's going on in our world. That's
Talk more about that.
that's a big that statement says an awful lot. So what we perceive, and we tend to think that everybody sees the world the way we see it, and truthfully nobody ever sees the world the same. we, because we all have our own perception, and much of our perception is, I would say, if you think of perception as like contact lenses or glasses that you put on, the lenses are a compilation of all of our history, all of our um, and so we see the world through those lenses, and
Hmm.
that's why everybody really has a different view of the world. So if you see the world through the lens of this is an unsafe world, then things are going to look unsafe to you that might not look unsafe to somebody else. So perception is huge in terms of stress.
And can people change that?
I believe they can. I mean, that's a lot of a lot of the work that I do with people is helping them to change their perceptions, the ones that aren't working for them. Because often we, well, so let me give you an example of my own life. I had a perception about myself for many, many, many years, sensitive. I mean, I was raised by a dad who was definitely too sensitive in his own belief about himself, and he worked so hard to be tough, and he
Hmm.
was going to make sure his daughter was tough because he thought if you were sensitive, you were vulnerable in the world. So he, his thing constantly was, you got to get a tough skin. You got to get a tough skin. And I tried so hard because I thought being sensitive was a bad thing. I tried so hard to be this tough woman, and
Hmm.
I remember it was at Villanova, believe it or not. I was standing, I had just come, this is so bizarre that it's like it was yesterday. I came out of the cafeteria and I'm standing looking out at the campus, and it hit me. I have been trying to put my size 10 foot in a 7 shoe because somebody's been telling me my whole life size because they have the most choices and the prettiest styles and yada yada yada. And my foot's sore. Like, I don't need to do this anymore. I'm a sensitive person. Why don't I just embrace that? And that was the
Hmm.
beginning of my journey. Like, I wish I could tell you it was a light switch and I just all of a sudden loved being sensitive. But that was the beginning for me of really beginning to appreciate what my sensitivity was really about, and what a gift it was. And today, if somebody were to ask me, well, what is it that you like the most about you? That's the number one thing. So it went from being the thing that I was trying to beat out of myself for years and
Hmm.
years to the thing that I really treasure the most.
Wow.
So that's a huge shift in perception.
Are there any exercises that people could do to either become more aware, or if we can relate it to like this idea of the stress, and right now just trying to get some semblance of control. This might this might lead to undue pressure or undue stress because of, trying to force a round peg into a square hole, or, vice versa, right?
Right.
Um,
No, and my guess is a lot of people are putting a lot of pressure on themselves to be the perfect. I mean, if you were doing this before this all happened, to be the perfect parent, to be the perfect employee, to be, all those things, this happening didn't stop that. So if that was a tendency that you had to have a lot of pressure on yourself, then you're probably experiencing that in spades now. So one of the things I think is just be gentle with yourself, to be kind to yourself. I saw a meme years ago on Facebook that said something like, I'm going to talk to myself today like I'm somebody that I love. And I was like, oh, I really like that. Because we don't always talk to ourselves today like we're somebody that we really love. We might talk to our kids that way. We might talk to our spouse that way. We might talk to our friends that way. But if you listen to the dialogue that goes on in your head when you look in the mirror and you go, I've gained a little weight, or, whatever the judgment is, or, oh, my hair looks terrible today, or whatever. We're very hard on ourselves. And most of the things that we say to ourselves, we wouldn't be caught dead saying to somebody else.
Yeah.
Yep. How long if we did?
Yeah.
So
we see it. Yeah, we see it all. We see it all the time in the gym. People try a lift, or think they can't do something, or get down on themselves for not succeeding the very first try they ever try something new. And it's like, would you tell your friend that, who's standing right next to you, the same thing you're telling yourself? And it's like, well, no, but yeah, we're our own worst critics, right?
I have to say, one of the things that I love about your gym, and I was a little intimidated when I first started, is that you really do accommodate, or accommodate's not the right word, but you acclimate things to wherever somebody is. And I never really feel like I'm not good enough, or I love that about the gym. Your gym.
Thank you. I'm going to save that clip, and we'll post that everywhere.
But
switching gears just a little bit, because I want to wrap it up soon, and then also open it up for questions.
Sure.
What do you think about meditation?
Well, I've never been really great at meditation, but I do like to sit and focus on breathing. And I think for doing that for a few minutes at a time, I find to be a very valuable thing. I usually set my timer for a couple minutes, 2-3 minutes at most, because sitting for longer than that, I just have never really found to be. A lot of people swear by meditation. So
but some would say that is a form of meditation, right?
It is a form of meditation.
Because there's different forms, right?
True.
Transcendental, and
Right.
So is this a routine that you do? Is it same time, same place, same, like what is your routine?
No, I don't really do the timer on my phone that goes off, and I, believe it or not, I have it on for every 2 minutes, because to me that's how important the breathing is. And you don't hear it every single time, and so 2 minutes for me really works. And then if I'm feeling a little stressed, or if I'm not feeling super calm or whatever, then I will sit down and just breathe, conscious breath for a couple of minutes.
Gotcha.
And that really helps.
I like that. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so I do want to open up for questions. If people have been holding back and want to ask questions, you can use the Q&A or the chat feature of the webinar. If people are going to be typing questions. Carol, do you have anything else you would want to tell someone who's, hearing things like, stopping and trying to figure out where their thoughts and feelings are coming from not being so hard on themselves, to, not trying to compare themselves if they are that type of person or get in social media. Is there any other strategies or other things they should be thinking about?
I have one exercise that I really love, and it works for me a lot, and it's worked for a lot of my clients. So I'll share that with you, where you just put your hands on your heart and you breathe and you close your eyes and you imagine that within your heart is the you that you were when you were a little kid. And I like to go to 1 to 2 years old. You can use any age that you want, but so you imagine that little kid in there, and you breathe and you whisper in the most gentle, loving voice that you have, I love you. I love you. And if you do that for a minute or two, it just shifts things within. It's a really beautiful practice. And do it with feeling, like you would say that to one of your kids, using the voice and that, try to get that feeling that you have for your child or for your dog, or your sister or your parent or whoever, where you have that really tender, loving, gentle feeling, and really try to connect with that feeling for that little kid that you were. That's a really, really awesome healing practice.
Yeah, I love that. There is a question. We'll keep these anonymous. So this person says, how can we non-professionals help others who may be struggling with anxiety? So I'm at, if this is a friend or coworker or significant other or whatever the case may be, relative, what's the best thing for, a non-professional to do?
Well, one of the things that I think we do, and I've been guilty of it as a mom too, when we love somebody, we don't want them to feel bad. So one of the things we often do with the people we're closest with is we say, oh, it's going to be okay. Oh, don't worry. You're fine. And it's the most invalidating thing you can do. So one of the things that I am always struck by is very often during a first session, when the client leaves, they'll say to me, oh, I just feel so much better having talked to you. And I think to myself, but I haven't done anything yet. Like jokingly, I think that. Like, you haven't really done anything yet. But I always recognize that what they're really saying is, you didn't say to me, I shouldn't be feeling this way. What's wrong with you? And not that we're that harsh with our, friends and
Sure.
kids or whatever, but the message sort of being, oh, come on, it's okay. It's kind of dismissive of the feelings. I think if you can validate for people, this is really hard. Or, if somebody comes to you and they say, I'm really stressed out, rather than saying, oh, it's going to be okay. If you say, well, talk to me about it. Sounds like you're having a really hard time.
Mm-hmm.
We almost don't want to say that, because it feels like if we say that, we're going to get them more stuck in it. And that's absolutely not the truth.
Right.
But like I said, I know for me as a mom, there's been times where with my own kids, because it's like, I don't want them to be sad. And yet
Right.
sometimes that's what we need more than anything, is to just have our sad validated and heard and accepted.
Right.
I'm feeling sad. Okay, it's okay that do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Which, if you are that friend or relative or significant other, you want to, number one, protect the person. Number two, not, let negative things come on this person. Like you want to fix things, right?
Absolutely.
And so what you're saying is, by saying, oh, it's going to be okay, don't feel sad, what you're basically saying is that whatever you're feeling right now is not what you should be feeling.
Exactly.
And that's not where you want to go.
Exactly.
Because you can't help how you feel.
Exactly. Well, and I hear, a lot of times with women, because men tend to be more product oriented and women are more process oriented. That's a general statement. It's not a,
Sure.
it's not 100% true, but a lot of times women will say, I just wish my husband would just listen to me and not try to tell me what to do. Like you said, fix it. That's
Right.
a very common thing. And I think women are very guilty of that with their kids as well, because we don't want our loved ones to feel bad. And yet
Mhm.
when you're feeling bad, you really just want to have that acknowledged. You don't want to, maybe after it's acknowledged, then we can help the person move to a different place. But as long as we're saying, no, 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 it's the same thing I was
Yeah.
saying with grief. If people are willing to acknowledge their grief, they can move through it. Whereas it's like in the ocean, if a big wave comes and you go with it, you ride it and you get this really nice ride and it becomes nothing when it gets up to the beach. But if you stand there and you buck that wave, it's taking you down. And that's what happens a lot of times with emotions. We don't want to feel it, so we push against it, and they're
Mhm.
stronger than us most often. So if we can just accept them and ride with them, they dissipate.
Yeah. You don't have to agree with it in the sense of like
Right.
being complacent,
Right.
but um,
Exactly.
sometimes the best thing to do is to sit with it, sit with the thought, acknowledge it, and have it pass through.
And the only time I would say that you don't ever want to sit with um, a feeling, yes, you want to sit with the feeling. A thought like I'm worthless or what the hell's wrong with me or any other kind of thought like that you don't want to sit with. That you want
Mm,
to challenge, because
got it.
those are negative perceptions, and those we want to challenge because they're not true.
Gotcha. Good point. I'd be remiss in not saying things like things that can help stress are things like working, or things that can help stress are things like working out, eating healthy,
Absolutely.
getting enough sleep.
Of course.
Um,
That was a
you know,
given.
yeah. Well, and this is.
But good.
I know if I didn't say it, someone would be like, well, "I thought you were going to talk about the benefits of working out." Um,
Right.
but and this is in large part, this is why I got into this field full time. I saw it as a way to to basically take a lot of the reasons why I got into counseling, but do it in a more active fashion and in a more physical sense. But
Absolutely.
all the same things apply in terms of like going back to that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, no, like we're probably not trying to find our best self right now. Like we are going definitely back to foundational
Yes.
needs, right? Shelter, food, water,
Absolutely.
making sure others around us are safe. Like, if you guys don't know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, just look it up. But it's this pyramid of needs, and at the bottom is just simply your basic physical human necessities.
Right.
And then as you go up, at the very top is what they call self-actualization, where you kind of like figure out who you are, and it
Right.
could be way more abstract. But
It's where you can ask the question, am I happy?
yeah, am I happy? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I, but
Would it make
if
you happy?
exactly right now, that is not the expectation. The
No.
expectation, or it is very normal.
Yes.
um, and I think normal is one of those things where a lot of people get stressed or anxious because they feel like they're not normal. They feel like they're the outlier,
Exactly.
because they see everyone else killing it, or everyone else doing things way better than they can, or what they perceive to be better, that comparison thing.
Exactly.
um, where no, everyone is trying to just survive. Like, just even the idea of getting like groceries, right? Like,
Yeah.
a lot of us are in a lot better spot than a lot of people in the world. That's for sure.
Mhm.
Absolutely certain. But it's okay to feel like you are basically going back to basic survival skills.
Yes.
Um,
Absolutely.
it
Mhm.
is very normal. Okay, so unless there's any last minute questions, or Carol, if you have any last minute things, I want to thank you for your time, because we
Thank
threw
you.
this together
Thank
pretty
you
last
for
minute.
having me do this. Was fun. This was great.
Um,
I think we pretty much covered.
cool. I would say if anyone has any questions, just message me on Facebook or email, and I can always pass your information along to Carol.
Absolutely.
Carol, where is your, like, what's the name of your practice, and where are you located?
It's Fairview Counseling Center, and right now we're located in my home. we're doing telehealth. So I'm doing Zoom just like this. I'm doing Zoom with people. I'm doing phone sessions with people. I prefer this because you don't miss the body language, which is so much of our communication. So I love the Zoom. But some people aren't technologically at that place, so phones.
Yep.
But I do have an office in Ambler and one in Norristown, and depending on how many months we're doing this, that could change. But right now, we still have both offices.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind doing telehealth for the rest of my days. I really love this because I can really reach whoever people aren't able to come. People that move, I've done.
Yeah, people that move, right? Yeah, old clients. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to try to do more webinars by bringing in basically our own members who are experts in different fields, and trying to get information out to you guys. Not necessarily about COVID, but just, I feel like we have such a talented member base, like we might as well use everyone's expertise. So, all right, everybody, have a good night, and thank you so much.
Chris. I appreciate it, and thank you to all the guests.
No problem. Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Have a great night. Take care.